American Trial Lawyers Association was looking to buy a building and needed a loan and came to our client for a fairly large loan that it wanted at low rates. In order to give it that kind of a loan, our client was willing to enter into a commercial mortgage-backed securities transaction. But in order to do that, there needed to be a material adverse change clause that was put into the contract between the parties. Shortly after the contract was entered for the commitment for this loan, the market in fact did have a substantial change, and our client was forced to trigger that material adverse change clause. The American Trial Lawyers Association is the association that represents the plaintiff's bar in the U.S. So in terms of people you want to have a dispute with, they're going to be a very difficult litigant. We knew that for our case, it was going to be really important for the jury to be able to understand what was going on. So we retained a mock jury in order to try out our themes. So we knew at that point that a critical piece of our trial strategy had to be to tell the story of why that provision was in there. That provision was a critical part of the overall transaction, and that the parties had in fact negotiated it for a long time, recognizing how important it was for the overall transaction. One of the critical things for our client, they enter into these sort of transactions all the time, and they need this particular provision to hold up. This material adverse change clause is front and center in a lot of their contracts. If we don't defend it here, where we had a pretty clear material adverse change, it was going to throw off a lot of their business. Now, as a former consultant, I understood the business implications for our client was we need to protect our ability to use these clauses in the future and to show that they're going to hold up. And so winning that at trial was huge implications for our client's business. So as the defendant in the case, obviously we don't get to put on our case until the end. So it was important for us to tell our story through the other side's witnesses, and particularly their expert witness. We did this not only well, we did this so well, we didn't even need to call our own expert witness. We effectively had a chart that showed the drop in this particular market. We showed it to their witness, who immediately noted, after we asked him, that the drop in the market was big, material, bad, adverse, and a change. Once we'd gotten that out of that expert, we knew we were 80% of the way home. The other 20%, they had alleged that this was foreseen or foreseeable by our client. But during his examination, the witness had used the phrase that the market had done a head fake. And we were able to get that witness to explain that a head fake is something that happens in basketball where you try to move in one direction when in fact you're moving the other direction. And by analogy, we showed through their own witness that the market participants, including my client, thought the market was going over here when in fact it was going over there. We couldn't foresee it at all. So we were afraid that the case was going to devolve into us calling the trial lawyers bad names and them calling, and most particularly them calling the bankers bad names. During the mediation process, the trial lawyer said, look, we know we're going to win because you guys are bankers. And this is 2010, everyone hates bankers, right? So we needed to figure out a way to get that out of something that the jury was going to hear. We needed to make this something that would be not name calling. And they also knew that most jurors weren't exactly sympathetic to trial lawyers, and so we came up with a mutual agreement that we wouldn't refer to each other's professions in a derogatory fashion. It was a huge success for our client. We ended up with a resolution that was far better than they had ever imagined going into this thing.